So now that we are recording, I would like to turn it over to our first presenter. And excuse me, that's Lauren Dietz from the Village of Waunakee to talk about their Housing Betterment Fund. Lauren, are you here? Lauren.
This is Todd. I don't see Lauren yet, but I'll see if I can figure out where she is.
Okie dokie.
Move on to number 2 and
okay, let's do that. Elise, are you here?
I'm here.
Oh, great. Lovely. Nice to see you.
Likewise.
So feel free to share screen. And I will.
I thought you would put all the slides together, but 1 second. Let me pull it up.
And feel free to reintroduce yourself and a little bit about Oregon if you want to, yeah, just give people some context.
Okay. My apologies. I thought we were doing one slideshow, so I hadn't pulled up my stuff.
Not at all.
I don't know if you want to move to number 3 and come back to me.
Okay. Becky, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'll
Okay.
go. Just give me a second to share my screen.
So just to prepare other presenters, please pull up your slideshow. I did not put everybody's slideshow together. Thank you.
All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Becky Binns. I'm the housing planner with the City of Sun Prairie. I wanted to start off just by talking a little bit about our Affordable Housing Fund, because that is where all of our, well, so far we've only had one, but where our TIF affordable housing extensions go. And the purpose of that Affordable Housing Fund is to support the housing goals we have in Sun Prairie that are on the screen. And just to give you an idea of where we're at with our fund. So in the beginning of 2024, oh, I think we have someone else who's not muted.
Can everyone please mute their Zoom down in the lower left? If you're not muted, please mute.
Okay. So the Affordable Housing Fund balance. So starting in 2024, we were at 126,400. Majority of that was coming from that one TID closure that we had earlier. And then we do have a recurring $10,000 general fund contribution that has been in effect since 2023. So we have a small fund right now, but we are funding 3 initiatives. So we have a satellite tenant resource center office. We have funds allocated for administration of an anti-retaliation program, and then a portion of the fund also goes to my salary. So the Satellite Tenant Resource Center office, that is a partnership, really wonderful partnership that I'm so excited about between Tenant Resource Center, Dane County, and Sunshine Place, which is our nonprofit service provider, kind of umbrella organization in Sun Prairie, super well trusted and connected with the community. And then the city is the 4th partner. And so what the project is Tenant Resource Center is providing their housing counseling, mediation, eviction, diversion, defense program, and they also do community outreach and education actually in the city of Sun Prairie. So they have an office at Sunshine Place right next to the JFF worker, housing navigation specialist, and some of those other organizations. So the goal, why we brought Tenant Resource Center to Sun Prairie, is to address the need that our bilingual renters and also landlords, because Tenant Resource Center does support landlords, the needs that we were hearing. So those needs were identified by our 2022 housing study. If your community hasn't done a housing study, I would highly recommend it. A lot of good data and recommendations that we continue to point back to. So in our housing study, and then also our nonprofit partners, Sunshine Place, continue to see a need for renter assistance and continue to see an increase in evictions. So the cost for this program, it's $75,000 per year. However, this is split 50-50 between the city and the county. So the city of Sun Prairie is providing $37,500 per year. And the position is actually split. So it's 3 days in Sun Prairie and then 2 days in Madison office serving all of Dane County. We're doing quarterly reports. So for our first quarter, which ended up actually only being 8 weeks from January to March, but between that time period, we had 112 calls on tenant resource centers, dedicated Sun Prairie phone line, and then 15 documented drop-in visits to tenant resource centers, Sun Prairie location. So we're on track. We have annual targets, but there'll be more to report once we have the next Q2 report.
Becky, what is
Some of the less.
Becky, what does EDP stand for?
Yep, sorry. So that is the Eviction Diversion and Defense Program.
Thank you.
Yep. Some of the lessons learned with this program. So majority of the work has occurred up front. So it was the budgeting, the showing up to meetings, the contracting, having everyone's lawyers, the legal review. That was just all very time consuming. And then I think the second piece I would say is the outreach. So we did an outreach push in January when TRC first started, but we continue to meet with Sunshine Place and Tenant Resource Center to talk about how we can get TRC in front of the community. So we're looking at doing like more events, putting it on. We have a Big Five community newsletter we put out, and just different ways we can feature that resource and get the word out to the community. And I think the importance of checking in with other organizations and municipalities who are doing housing work. There's a lot of really good stuff going on. Who knows, you may get a partner out of it. I think just for the idea generation, lessons learned, or even just having a mutually supportive ear. I think those are really great things that came out of this partnership. The second program is the administration of a retaliation ordinance. So in 2023, the city of Sun Prairie adopted a retaliation ordinance, the goal of which is to protect tenants who complain about a building code violation and later receive some sort of retaliation by their housing provider. So that could be a significant increase in rent immediately after that, non-renewal notice, or even harassment. So we adopted that ordinance. We also allocated funding to enforce that ordinance. And so what that looks like is we are contracting with the Madison Department of Civil Rights to do mediation, investigation, and conciliation between renters and landlords for retaliation cases. So this ordinance and program aren't going to stop retaliation, but it allows for a remedy that was not there before. So the cost to this, we have allocated $15,000, and it's going to be a time and materials contract. So we're only actually paying for the hours worked by the Madison Department of Civil Rights. The impact is still to be determined. Our anticipated rollout of this program is September 2024. And then the third program is my salary, or the Housing and Equitable Development Planner salary. So the goal of this is to hire someone who can actually dedicate time to do housing work. We have a lot of people at Sun Prairie who know a lot about housing. I think planners, the community development specialists, often get really busy with development proposals and talking to developers, talking to residents about different projects. So this was a recommendation, again, that came specifically from our 2022 housing study. The cost, so like I mentioned, part of my salary comes from the fund. So the city decided to take $35,000 a year from the Affordable Housing Fund, and then the remainder is coming from ARPA funds for a temporary time period, and then from other TID funds. Impact, I just included the 2023 housing snapshot, some of the housing actions we've accomplished, the retaliation ordinance obviously being a big one, along with TRC. But we also helped launch a housing coalition, which is like a community education and advocacy group, did Affordable Housing Month, highlighted some really cool resources. So there've been some good things happening, I think. One thing I would say, not really a lesson learned, but just for consideration, something to talk about, and that the city of Sun Prairie talked about, is future funding for the position, because TID closures aren't a guarantee what happens if there isn't funding in the Affordable Housing Fund. So making sure you have some kind of contingency, whether that's general fund or some other funding source to fund the position. For the future of Affordable Housing Fund in Sun Prairie, we're looking at 2 potential TID closures with affordable housing extension in 2026. So we'd have approximately 5.4 million in 2027. So we're currently working on an affordable housing fund policy to outline what those funds will be used for. We actually just discussed this at our June Housing Committee meeting, and we're looking at kind of two buckets. One is more of a strategic subsidy, so places where the market is just not at all meeting a need. So we're looking at down payment assistance, rehabilitation, possibly loans to developers for new affordable owner-occupied housing. And then in the stability bucket, supporting service providers and case management like Tenant Resource Center, like the retaliation. So addressing some of those more pressing urgent needs. But this is all very preliminary. This is just an idea of what we're talking about and where we could be headed. And then I guess I'll end with just some policy items to consider. If you're funding programs primarily from TID closures, obviously that funding is sporadic. So taking that into account and whether you're going to be offering loans or grants, considering whether there are time periods where you just don't have funding, just all kind of policy discussions to have with your housing committees and staff. And then if you take anything away from this, I think one of my biggest takeaways is the affordable housing extensions aren't guaranteed. So the Joint Review Board, your council has to approve those extensions. So you have to be communicating why housing work is important, why these affordable housing extensions are important. And that is what I will leave you with. Thank you.
Becky, thank you so much. That's great. It's amazing how much work you've done in such a short period of time. I don't even think, how long have you been at the city of Sun Prairie now?
A year and a half.
Wow. Hit the
Feels
ground
like a long
running.
time.
Hit the
It's
ground
been
running.
good.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks.
I do have a bunch of questions, but I think we should move on to the next person since we have 4 people. And who is this? Is someone sharing their screen?
Oop, that was still me. Sorry.
Okay.
We're good now.
Okay. Is Lauren here yet?
I am. Yes, sorry.
It's okay. It's quite all right. Lauren, welcome. It's great to see you or have you be here with us. Lauren's from the village of Wanakee. And Lauren, you can introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about Wanakee and the program that you have used through TIF extension funds. That would be great.
Yeah, so I'm Lauren and the Community Development Director for Wanakee. I've been here since January. The footwork for this program was created and done well before my time. I still am taking credit for it because I saw it over the goal line. So this is my program. But let me share this really quick. Wanakee is on the northwest side of Madison, so kind of north of Middleton and Lake Mendota. And as of the last estimates, we were about 16,000 people. And I just did some math the other day, and we've grown about 20% since 2017. So it's a quite a lively and thriving community. So we started the Wanakee Housing Betterment Fund, which is affordable housing rehab grants. Affordable housing means something a little bit different in a community where your median home value is $453 and your median income is somewhere around $134,000. So sometimes you have to kind of shift your lens a little bit to wrap your mind around the numbers a little bit. But for funding, it's based on the 1-year TID extensions. So far, we've had 2 TIDs that were extended. The first one was our TID 2 closure, which netted about $478,000. 326 of that went to a LIHTC project. So the remaining about 151 is what's currently sitting in our fund. We recently closed TID 3, and that we should get the money from that by the end of the year, which is about another $589,000. So you can see your running total. TID closures aren't guaranteed, but if we were to do TID closures on the next 3, by the end of that, we would have about $3.1 million towards affordable housing projects, most of it being the Wanakee Housing Betterment Fund, but understanding that there may be other ideas that come along that maybe we start to look really seriously at. The grants are non-repayable. So it becomes a little bit of an issue of longevity when you do non-repayable grants. How much per cycle are you awarding? How much per year? Are you measuring that year on a calendar basis, on a rolling basis? At the last meeting, which was the first one that they approved grants for, they decided about $50,000 per cycle, a grand total of $150,000 per year on a rolling basis. So that way, if this most recent one, I'll have the number later, but it came in under $50,000. So you can roll that over to the next cycle to see, to hopefully bolster the available funds if you get more applications than you were expecting for that one. We've learned quite a few things as we started out. You think you have this great program, this great language, it's self-explanatory, the best laid plans kind of thing. So first with your website is if you want a lot of phone calls, fill your website with tiny text and links, and then put your contact info at the bottom of the page. People just go straight to the bottom of the page and to your phone number, and you end up spending a lot of time helping them navigate through the website and to the places that they need to go to. And then also don't really explain how to read the HUD income chart. As planners, we're used to reading these kinds of things, and so it becomes kind of intuitive for us to understand them, but you still get these phone calls. So what if I'm a single mom with 4 kids in the house? I make this much money. Where do I fall on the grading rubric? And so we get a lot of questions of what do you mean? So even the scoring rubric, we think it's somewhat self-explanatory. The biggest questions we thought would come in the areas of repair need and livability, because they're kind of subjective elements. But what has really become confusing for people is actually the household income and the housing value. So like I said, with the housing income, we use the HUD guidelines for low, very low, and extremely low income. And then you see this ×3 in the corner, and no one really knows what this ×3 means, but it's weighted by 3. And so we're working on some tweaks to try to make things a little bit more understandable based on the feedback that we've gotten so far. And even housing value, people look at these numbers and like, are you seriously saying that if I have a house that's $401,000, I get points for that? And yes, you do, because our housing prices are so high at the moment. We also have questions when it comes to definitions that we've used. What do you mean by median income? Are we using Waunakee's median income or the HUD-Madison Metro income? There's about a $10,000 difference between those two numbers. So we've decided to use Waunakee's specific number, which I apparently spelled Waunakee wrong here. I apologize. We use Waunakee's specific number because it gives people a little bit more wiggle room, even though the rest of the HUD table doesn't change. One of the first questions we got was the program says have 60 days of pay stubs, but apparently Social Security doesn't send monthly statements or any proof of deposit aside from your bank account showing that you received this money from Social Security Administration. So what do you do in those cases? When you look at the scoring rubric, what does livability mean? Do you use the USDA and HUD guidelines for what livability means, or do you create your own definition of it? And our CDA has decided to kind of go based off of their own definition of livability, but haven't fully fleshed that out. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be working on in the next meeting is, what do you mean by livability? Not just so we can answer questions when people call us and ask about it, but also to try to reduce the appearance of any kind of excessive subjectivity that someone says, well, you said that changes their livability, but you said it doesn't affect my livability. And what's the difference? We need to be able to answer that. How do you estimate repair need on a still working mechanical system that may be 20 years old? It's at its expected lifetime, it's over its expected lifetime, but do you wait until it fully breaks because it's still usable? And then do you use the HUD income thresholds or ACS thresholds? That one was pretty easy for us to figure out. When the program was created, we were using ACS thresholds, which uses 60% as one of the baselines. And so that's what we had on the rubric, but the HUD guidelines are at 51% for that cutoff. And so it made it really hard to score. So we decided to use the HUD income thresholds to make the scoring easier, both to administer and to understand. Other questions we've gotten or feedback we've gotten is, I don't pay taxes. I don't have pay stubs. My air conditioner died. It's 1,000 degrees outside, and I can't wait until September to find out if I qualify for this grant. Because our grant is set up that you can't do any work before the grant is approved. If it is, then we're sorry, you don't qualify for this grant. So are we coming up with some kind of emergency fund? That's another question that we're working on. So for the I don't pay taxes, we do have quite a sizable contingent of people who are on Social Security or some other kind of fixed income that puts them below the income tax threshold. So we created and have them fill out an affidavit of non-filing of taxes. So we have some kind of legal record that they are affirming that they do not file taxes. I don't have pay stubs. Some people are daycare providers that use handwritten ledgers that are just in a notebook. We have asked for bank statements for people like those who are on Social Security so that we have a record of those deposits coming in for those months. But we also have an affidavit verifying income that they have to sign that though I don't have pay stubs, this is what my income is. But even we've decided to change the language that we use where originally it was pay stubs, but now have changed it to proof of income. So sometimes you have to be really careful about the wording that you use. For some people, it can't wait and you have to look at what your program language says. Our program language says either you wait or you do it and you don't qualify for the loan or for the grant because the work has already been done. And that's a really hard thing to say to people. One person we talked to the other day lives in one of the 7 oldest houses in the village, and it's an old flagstone foundation that's starting to cave in. He said it's potentially getting to a point of no return, and who knows if it can wait until September, but we don't currently have anything in our program that allows for these kind of emergency situations. And so we're going to be talking to CDA about creating an emergency fund, and not just the fund itself, but how is it administered? Is this a staff level decision that their air conditioner broke and we can approve up to $5,000 in grant funds? Or do we do it in consultation with the chair of the committee? Do we call a Zoom meeting within so many days of receiving the application? Things that we're going to try to work through, coming up with ideas and hoping one of them sticks. And one person, it never fails that you think you have everything figured out and then someone just throws you a curveball. And so the newest one was, I'm on a payment plan with my contractor. Well, we do this as a reimbursement grant. And rather than giving them a partial reimbursement every time they pay their contractor, because we require them to show proof of full payment to the contractor. Well, you're going to have to wait until you've paid in full to your contractor and can provide us with proof of full payment to your contractor. And then we'll do the reimbursement. So it ends up extending the process a little bit. And so again, what about emergencies? Do you wait for the 80-year-old lady's 22-year-old HVAC and 17-year-old air conditioner to die to deem it a necessary upgrade? How do you score it when you're talking about expected lifetime of a furnace or central air unit? And what if it dies in between the triennial reviews? These are questions that are great to ask that we don't have answers for. And so one of the things that CDA has asked us to do is go to the experts and say, what's the expected lifetime of these units? Once it hits a certain age, what's its propensity to die? So we just had our first round of applications. We got 6 applications in. All 6 were awarded grant funds. This one, we actually did go outside of the program guidelines a little bit, where someone sent in an application and said, oh, by the way, I didn't read the guidelines until after I did my application. We've already re-roofed our house. When again, like I mentioned before, the grant guidelines say that you have to do the work after you've been approved for this grant. So they did make a one-time exception because it was the first time we've ever done this grant program. People didn't have a whole lot of time to really absorb all this information and answer questions before we started going into these reviews. So they decided to make that one-time exception, but moving forward, they have decided they won't be making those types of exceptions anymore. So we're not changing our program at all. But some of the things that we did fund were windows. Someone came in with 48-year-old wooden casement windows that are leaking and rotting and need to be replaced. Siding was actually an interesting one because when looking at the pictures, one of our CDA members said that just looks like bad maintenance and should we be funding poor home ownership, which was a really intense thing to say, and also comes with its own assumptions about how something got into that state in the first place. So part of my job in that moment was to kind of walk it back a little bit and say, well, maybe they've only owned it for a couple of years, and are we holding them responsible for the home ownership maintenance of the person who lived there before them? We don't know what situation they're in. This could just be poor manufacturing. There's a lot of unknowns. And so are we going to put the onus on a specific person for the way that something came out? And the other one was roofing, which this one doesn't necessarily look like roofing, but this is them pulling up their shingles and showing the rotting substrate under their roof. And then the question came up, should we be giving money to someone who's going to get reimbursed by insurance or another grant program? And staff had initially approached this as a program that was stackable with other programs through Dane County, the state. Even if you were getting insurance reimbursement, a lot of times you don't get a full reimbursement for something. And then this question was asked, and we have now started asking on the applications, are you receiving any outside funding? And it's not necessarily to immediately say, no, you can't do that. But what they want to make sure is that someone's not getting over reimbursed on a project, that they're actually making money off of it. So the first round of applications, like I said, we had 6 of them. It was a grand total of $33,838.44 that went to a range of causes. And like I said earlier, they had agreed to budget $50,000 per cycle. We do this 3 times a year. So there's about $16,000 that's going to move forward to the next cycle. So if we get some larger projects or more applications, there should be some extra money available to them. And I will stop there. And
Lauren, thank you so much. That was very detailed and extremely helpful. Rehab, as we know, is a really important way of preserving housing, and particularly affordable housing and our older housing stock. And so it's really great that Waunakee's undertaken this initiative. And it just goes to show how complicated it is. And we're so glad that you have initiated this, because I think you might be the only community, or one of the only communities in Dane County who's done this. Maybe the city of Madison has a rehab program, and yeah. So thank you so much. And let's just hold questions or put them in the chat for now and move on to Elise Cruz from the Village of Oregon.
Okay, I'm back. I'm ready. Thank you for your patience and flexibility there. So, I'm Elise Cruz. I work for the Village of Oregon. I'm the Director of Community Development. I grew up here in the village, moved away, got stuck back in here. I've just pretty much given up at this point. So it's a good place to be stuck. We have also been, like everywhere, growing quite a bit. We're only about 8 miles south of Madison and really easy access off Highway 14. So good schools, all the things. So I believe we've grown about 20% in the last 5 years or so. From about 2019 to 2024, we were about had just reached 10,000 people when I started in 2019, and we're estimated to be about 12,000 right now. So a lot happening on all fronts down here too. We had I will go ahead and share my screen too. We had our TID number 2 close in 18 or 19. Okay, apparently. All right, can you guys see here?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. So we had TID 2 close in kind of 17, 18, 19. We had kept it open, and about $500,000 were in our, what we deemed the Workforce Housing Fund. My slides are pretty short and sweet and simple. We don't have any kind of program that we were administering. This was more projects that we approached the developer, a developer approached us to utilize the funding. So other people doing a lot of the work. And now that I'm hearing what some of these programs take to administer, I understand why we haven't done anything like that, because I'm more or less a one-woman show down here, but happy to learn what everybody else is doing and taking lots of notes. So the first grant that we gave from that Workforce Housing Fund was in late 2019, early 2020, 168,000 of that went for matching funds for Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago grant for Genesis Housing, which is a nonprofit here in the area that provides extremely low income seniors and those with disabilities rental housing. This was funded way back in the 70s from some USDA rural development funds. And of course, we don't qualify as rural anymore, but these properties couldn't really exist new today, but wanted to maintain those units. And obviously they've been built in the 70s. There was some renovation that needed to happen. So there was a lot of interior and exterior work on 40 of the units that was spent, and that work was done 2020, I think maybe into 2021. The next project that we supported and actually have not paid our installments to Habitat yet, just because the construction's still underway, but $180,000 has been promised for the creation of 8 owner-occupied duplexes. So you can see here on the site plan, they're kind of on a little private drive cul-de-sac. This was an infill project. Weirdly enough, I actually stumbled upon this property while I was looking for my own home when we just moved back to Dane County, and it's a remnant of an old Bible camp, summer camp location that was in Oregon. This was, of course, the edge of town at one point. So it was about 1.3 acres, and that this isn't really quite what I want for my family, but maybe it would be a good redevelopment for something else, and happened to be a Habitat breakfast and met with Steve Hanrahan, their COO, and asked him if he wanted to come down to Oregon. So we tromped around in the snow a couple of weeks before COVID hit, and showed him the property. And we have the first two units have their home dedication later this month, but the next two are under construction, and so we'll pay that 180 in two pieces, once with the first 4 units and once with the other half with the second 4 units. So there's some stormwater and trails in the back. We worked a lot with the Historical Society too on this project to honor the history of the site. There was some really interesting rock remnants and buildings and things from the camp. I'm not quite even sure how to describe them, kind of like cairns, but they were saved and moved, or either moved to the museum or moved closer to the roads. And we'll have kind of a interpretive sign. That's what that front parcel with that little red dot is showing there. So really excited about that. Obviously that's owner occupied units, and this was just outside of one of our other TIDs, so they were not eligible to receive TIF grant here. So we're grateful for the flexibility of our workforce housing fund to be able to support that project. And we still have about 150,000 remaining for eligible projects. Obviously some flexibility to serve projects outside of a TID. So that's not necessarily spoken for at this point, but I believe our board appreciates that, knowing that it's there, and it's definitely something that we're reminding them of. And when we're meeting with developers, if that's something that we feel could be a good fit, bringing that to the table, and not necessarily going to spend it all in one place too. But yeah, we don't really have a lot of policies or programs established for how these are used. It's just generally been these development projects that and grants we have supported. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Elise. That's great to know that that you're able to do some infill with Habitat for Humanity. That's an excellent project, and it's typical. That seems a little bit more dense than they usually do. 8 units, or right? Is it 8 units or 4 units?
Yep, 4 duplex buildings, 8 units.
So 8 units on an acre and a half. That's great that you were able to find that use and make that partnership. Awesome. So we're gonna keep moving on to the next person is Joyce Frey, the city of Fitchburg. Joyce, are you here? Joyce, hello? Okay. Well, Matt, I see you. So would you be willing to go next?
Sure, I can do that. Let me just share quick.
Okay, Matt Frater from the City of Madison in the Community Development Department division. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, of course. Hope y'all can see my slides here. Great. So hi, y'all. Great to see so many friendly faces out there today. As Olivia said, my name is Matt Frater. He, him, I am a community development specialist here in the City of Madison's CDD, that's Community Development Division, part of our Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department. So obviously here today to talk about TIF extension funds, specifically the TIF Affordable Housing Extension. And in the City of Madison, when we talk about the TIF extension, we also talk about the Affordable Housing Fund. Largely that's because they're one and the same thing. So our TIF extension funds get immediately rolled over into our Affordable Housing Fund, which was created as it is now within the 2015 budget. Our first RFP to support tax credit development was in fall of 2014. So this is used to create units that are affordable to lower income households. We do it a couple of different ways, but when we talk about lower income households and what an affordable unit is, in the City of Madison, that's units that serve households at or under 60% AMI for rental, or at or under 80% AMI for home ownership. This Affordable Housing Fund is development funding only. We don't do any services. All of the funding goes out as a loan. And the focus really is on gap financing. So underwriting, ensuring that we're not overspending public dollars, but really just closing financial gaps that exist in order to get these units built. You can see on the right here, our Affordable Housing Fund, it actually started back in 2013-14 with about $3 million. climbed to 4.5 million in 2018. 2023 was about 10 million, and then, as noted in the RHS kickoff, doubled to 20 million for 2024. Projections in our CIP are on the right there then for 25, 26, and 27. So though we roll over our TIF extension funding into our affordable housing fund, it's not just TIF extension funding. As noted by other folks, in order to do something consistently, make sure that there is funding available, as a city, we believed we had to commit to that funding in order to get the housing that we wanted, knowing that we were in such a shortage, especially for affordable units. So historically, TIF extension funding has been a large majority of our affordable housing fund, though over the years, 2020 onward, as folks have noted, it's irregular. It's become less of a substantial portion, especially as the fund has grown. Getting the results that we want to see requires that investment. So looking just at the past 7 years, then 2018 to 2024, we've seen it be about 50-50. So about 29 million then in GO borrowing, just over 28.5 million in affordable housing TIF extension funds. So our affordable housing fund then is split and sent out via 3 different methods, 3 different requests for proposals. The first is an annual process that we use to deliver gap financing for tax credit developments. The next is for non-tax credit developments, and then home ownership development. Those last 2 are RFPs that go out every 2 years, also pull in other sources of funding, federal funding, in order to see some of the results we want to see there. I'll touch on those 2 and then come back to the tax credit in a little bit more detail. So briefly for home ownership, we fund a couple of different kinds of models here. We fund permanent affordability, we fund equity appreciation models, we fund co-housing, we funded lease to purchase programs, which are sort of an in-between model. And then just want to note that there are other homeownership initiatives that we fund as well, just not using TIF extension because they're so complementary. So we fund mortgage reduction programs, notably for Habitat. Instead of providing development funding, we help write down the mortgage for the home buyers instead, home repair programs, and then home buyer and financial education as well. So just touching on the largest barrier here is obviously the subsidy required per unit to make these homes affordable to people to buy. We're looking at about $150,000 per home in development costs, whether it's acquisition and rehab or whether it's new construction. If it's new construction, that doesn't count land costs in it at all. But the largest benefit, obviously, is with stacking development programs with other forms of financial assistance for home buyers. We can serve home buyers who are as low as 30% AMI for a family, which we've had a fair amount of success with through the Land Trust as well as some other of our programs. So for our non-tax credit RFP, the second one here, we fund cooperatives, we fund nonprofit developers, for-profit developers, but it's generally shallow affordability because we're not stacking it with other subsidy programs. We're really looking at the limits of what we consider to be affordable units here in the city. So that is, right at or just under the 60% AMI threshold. There's just not enough additional subsidy to get the deep affordability that you see through stacking programs or through other programs. But does really focus on missing middle style development. So we funded co-ops that are anywhere from 7 to 15 units and apartment style rental buildings anywhere from 11 to 34 units through this program. Again, largest barrier similar to homeownership is just the subsidy required per unit to make it affordable. We see about $50,000 in rehab for apartments not leveraging tax credits, or up to $100,000, maybe even more for new construction per unit, not leveraging tax credits in order to get that 60% AMI number. As we know, construction costs have just increased drastically. And so that's something we're continuing to keep an eye on. But the benefit really is funding for non-traditional development types that are otherwise priced out of the market, whether that's a co-op that's looking for single-family homes to turn into a housing cooperative in an appreciating single-family home market, or whether that's with the increase in construction costs that make smaller scale development less feasible. These are the kind of things that we're looking to fund through this program. But by and far, the largest source of our funding, the largest use of our affordable housing fund for funding is our tax credit RFP. So this is the one that runs every single year. So our tax credit RFP started because we had such a drastically low, and still do have such a drastically low vacancy rate. And what we saw within that is growth has been huge here, and we weren't just not building enough homes, but the apartments that exist for people to rent out in the community, the vacancy rates are even lower in the lower cost units. So the 3-star vacancies, the 1 and 2-star vacancies, competition is tighter for lower costs than they are for market rate units or newly constructed units. So what we see is we are about half the national average, depending on, no matter the market segment, we're about half the national average for vacancy, and currently the 3rd lowest vacancy rate in the country. And because the vacancy is tighter in those lower market segments, that means that the rent growth is uneven too. So for the 3-star properties, for the 1 and 2-star properties, folks who would find those affordable find their rent going up higher as a percentage year to year than other new construction and other market rate developments. So ensuring that we can help leverage the subsidy programs that currently exist to make sure folks don't get priced out of their units or neighborhoods that they want to continue to stay in. So our tax credit RFP, where it started was in the fall of 2014. We put out a 6-page RFP, and we said, WIDA runs the low-income housing tax credit program. They're the allocating agency in the state of Wisconsin. We just want to make sure we get some low-income housing tax credit developments. We're willing to give gap financing to try and increase the odds of us getting that. We're just going to tag along with all of WIDA's preferences. Send us your proposals, and we will underwrite it and see what we can provide you for financing. So again, this was 2014 where it started, and this is where we are now. So this is our current RFP for this year, 48 pages. And I say that not to say, oh my God, Madison, what are you doing? I say that to say, to get what you want as a community, you need to be really specific in the preferences and the requirements that you want to put out there in order to leverage what works best for the folks who live there. That's something that we've realized slowly over the years. And so just instead of tagging on to WIDA's program, going with what their requirements and their preferences are, we're saying we want to help drive the ship. We want to do more of what works for us and works for our residents here. So some of those requirements and preferences that we put in, I think they're incredibly important, is an emphasis on 30% AMI units. We're about 12,000 units short here in the city. So trying to get as many of those units online as we possibly can. Preference for permanent affordability, which offers more favorable loan terms for folks who come in for gap financing. But even if that's a preference, we have a long-term affordability requirement, which is a land use restriction that's 10 years longer than is required by WIDA. We have tenant selection plan requirements to make sure that folks who actually apply for housing who live in communities can get into the housing. And we have energy efficiency and sustainability requirements, universal design requirements. And then since we started the program, the tax credit model has shifted a bit in what's financially feasible, what folks are coming in for. We used to see a lot of folks come in for 9% low-income housing tax credits. That shifted to 4% with the state 4% once the state tax credit was initiated. And now we're seeing a lot of the non-competitive 4% tax credits. So we want to keep this RFP open to everyone, but making sure that no matter what avenue they go down with WIDA, that they're still meeting preferences and requirements that we have as a city. So just touching on a couple of the requirements and preferences here, requirements for energy efficiency and sustainability. Go to Focus on Energy, submit an application, and make sure that your building is hitting 20% over the baseline energy savings. Minimum 30 kilowatt solar array, obviously preferences for higher levels of energy efficiency, higher levels of sustainability within our RFP as well. Requirements for supportive housing to serve individuals and families that are experiencing homelessness, and not just serve them, but come to the table, come to us with your proposal with support service coordinators and agencies already partnered, and not just partnered with, but ensuring that they have funding available too. So we want to make sure that agencies who are doing the work at these buildings are adequately funded to do the work at these buildings and ultimately provide services that keep folks more stably housed. We do have preferences for other populations as well. And really are open to a whole range of supportive housing arrangements for some of the proposals that come in. We do also have tenant selection plan or TSP standards because we believe that, you know, property managers often look at applications and they see prior deficiencies within people's rental history. But you can't overcome those deficiencies until you have safe, stable, and affordable housing. And that helps alleviate a lot of that. So as a community, we've put additional restrictions on what folks cannot be denied for developments that are receiving our funding. So these are just a couple of them. On the next slide here, we just have a couple more. So for instance, you can't be denied for an eviction that happened more than 2 years ago. We limit how much folks can charge for a security deposit. limit rent increases at new buildings that have our funding in them, and limit what folks can be non-renewed for more generally. We also have a criminal look back period. Lots of folks have various things within their criminal history that they get denied for, whether it's serious or not, but essentially capping misdemeanor lookbacks for 2 years, felonies at 5 years, with some exceptions that go back to 10 years. Again, just making sure that folks who live in the community actually have access to the housing that's getting built there. So this is our Affordable Housing Fund target area map. So those are the requirements for and preferences for what we want to see in the buildings itself. This is where we want to see it. It's largely driven by our transit, so builds on our Metro Transit network redesign, but also builds on our comprehensive plan, understanding that planners in our communities are the ones who are most capable of deciding and guiding where future growth should be. So looking at our growth priority areas within our comprehensive plan, and then finally coupling with our TOD, that's transit oriented development zoning overlay, which really says those high frequency transit routes, which you see in purple here on our Affordable Housing Fund target area map, are the places where we want to see development, and we want to make it as easy as possible to develop there. And so this is what's been built over the past decade. So these are the units, the tax credit developments that we have provided partial funding to, and where they are within the city. Super happy to share that in proposed there, the gray dots on the screen, all were funded through this last round of allocation of low-income housing tax credits through WIDA, and then including the City of Madison's CDA, Community Development Authority Triangle Redevelopment Phase 1. That means as a city, through this program and through CDA, we went 5 for 5 in tax credit applications this past year, which is setting a new bar for us. It's more than we've seen in the past, and something that we are incredibly excited about and incredibly excited to keep moving forward in. So just stacking those two things together, these maps are a little misaligned, but you can more or less see that that's exactly what happened, is where we say we want development. Largely, we've gotten development, areas that make sense, areas where it makes it easy for folks to get to the grocery store, jobs, the pharmacy, any place they might need to get to as part of their daily lives without having access to a car. And finally, I just want to touch on a couple of things. So over the 10-year, 11 now year history of our Affordable Housing Fund for tax credits, this is the breakdown of on a per unit basis, essentially what units cost. So on average, we contribute about 10% of the development cost per unit. Though the cost of construction costs and unit pricing has gone up significantly, more than doubling over the past 10 years. So this past year, 2023, our Affordable Housing Fund commitments were greater than $30,000 per unit for the first time in the history of the program, which is still relatively low considering how much construction costs have gone up. If you put that on a per dollar basis for new unit construction, tax credit equity pays for about 50 cents or half of what each new unit costs to create. Debt, other soft sources of financing are about 40 cents. And then our Affordable Housing Fund is only 8 cents on the dollar, which I think is really a testament to the leveraging that we can get by stacking through other subsidy programs. Over the history of the program, we do also sub in some TIF if they're ineligible TIF districts, and that's about 2 cents on the dollar over the history of the program. So finally, just talking about some outcomes for tax credit development only. Again, this program, we've awarded 33 different developments funding, just over $57 million of city financial commitments, and has created almost 2,800 new units of housing. 2,200 of those are what we as a city consider to be affordable, which are 60% AMI or under. And then 469, we're going to get over 500 this year, are those 30% extremely low income units for folks who make under 30% of the area median income, who otherwise would be facing these market pressures and being displaced from the city. 641 of those units have support services attached, whether they are for folks who were previously experiencing homelessness or other support service populations, and not just support services attached, but funded by the developer support services attached. And the last one here that I want to share is the city's $57 million in commitments has generated almost $750 million in total new development in the city over the past decade. So again, $57 million of commitments, $731 million in total development costs that we've seen through this program. So again, the leveraging there, we feel like has been really, really incredibly successful. And we're excited to keep it running, y'all. We hope to talk to more of you about it soon. But for there, I'll just end it and say thanks y'all for the time.
Matt, thank you so much. That was a terrific presentation, and we probably could have given you the whole hour. You've been at this a while, and really appreciate the insights and the details. So one of the reasons for doing this, obviously, is so everyone can learn from each other and share their experiences and also reach out to each other. I will share this recording and the PowerPoints with you. They'll be going on the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy website. We're developing a resources page as part of the strategic regional housing strategic action plan. But feel free to direct message or reach out to any of the presenters that you've seen today. Joyce Frey is not well, so she's not going to be joining us, which is probably okay because it's 4 o'clock. But I do want to allow for some questions if any of you have some. There was so much information shared, and yeah, so if anybody does, please just raise your hand and I can call on you or put it in the chat. And I can look in the chat right now. Question for Matt. How have residents reacted to the development of new affordable housing under this program? Have neighbors been supportive or not? Matt, are you there?
I'm here and I'm thinking about how to answer that. So we had a lot more concerns in the early years of the program from neighbors. But one of the things that we require as part of the RFP process is for developers to get in front of the neighborhood as soon as possible. So as part of our RFP that we've added in, since it was those 6 pages, is you have to meet with your alder before you submit an application. You have to have a neighborhood meeting. You have to include genuine neighbor feedback within the design of your building in ways that actually make it better. So I think over the past decade, we've made a concerted effort to work with neighborhoods. And a lot of the concerns that we've seen have really have gone away as we've continued to put out more housing and have worked with folks along through the process.
Great, thank you. There was also another question, the TSP standards of tenant selection standards, how to ensure that developers adhere to those standards.
So they're attached as an appendix to the contract. So they are their own exhibit within the contract document.
So legally, they have to, right?
Legally, they have to, otherwise it would be a default of their contract.
Okay. And I'm sure there are legal ramifications for being in default of your contract. Okay. Another question, if a felony conviction is 5 or 10 years ago, but the person has been in prison during that whole time, is there an effort to ensure they have sufficient support to re-enter independent living? Is that part of the requirements in the RFP?
So it's not part of the requirements in the RFP specifically related to our tenant selection plan, but the supportive housing component and needing to come to the city with a supportive service coordinator agency, at least one, if not more, already in place, plays into that too, because those support services, and maybe if it's not the individual agency, they need to be able to make referrals and work with folks who live in the building to find appropriate agencies. All of these agencies have extensive networks of people and resources that they can refer folks to, but those aren't just dedicated to those units. So there are units within our RFP that have support service coordination attached to them. Folks don't have to take it, but those services are open to anyone who lives in the entire building. So it's something that we have thought about and something that we've seen where other folks stop by because we require those to be on site for at least a portion of the week, where folks come in and do get referred for those as well and get support through those same agencies that are there on site.
Okay, great, thank you. Ryan Suzuki noted that in Mount Horeb, they're in the 2nd year of their residential exterior improvement program. And for those of you who are interested in doing rehab or exterior improvement programs, Ryan has put a link in the chat. So please feel free to go to that. One question from earlier is how much administrative staff time goes into managing Wanakee's excuse me, Wanakee's Betterment Program? It seems like it would take a lot of time to review and improve grants. How much of the money goes to cover administrative costs? Are you still with us, Lauren?
Yep, I'm here. It's probably only an hour or so of phone calls each week. Once we get towards people actually handing in applications, the staff time gets a little bit heavier, and then we do a triannual review, and that's where we really start putting the time in. So it's a little bit cyclical. So it's a little, and we've only done it once, so it's a little hard to say exactly how much time goes into it. But the last review period was a good chunk of the week leading up to the Community Development Authority meeting, just to get everything put together and synthesized and in a format that was easy for CDA to take in one meeting.
So does that answer your question? I think that's at this point, that's probably the best we can do. If it's triannual, you're having 3 formal CDA meetings a year, correct?
We have a CDA meeting every month, but we do a triannual review of the Housing Betterment Fund.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. So any more questions in the chat and or any more questions in the call altogether? Hands raised. Well, I think this was a really great, thank you so much, everybody, to all of our speakers. And I really appreciate you all coming and putting your information together. It was very helpful. I learned a lot. I'm sure others learned a lot. And this tool that we have is only going to continue to grow as more and more communities have TIFs that close, and have the opportunity to actually apply these apply the funds to their affordable and workforce housing priorities. I think Becky, your sort of lessons learned was really important, that it's important for everyone to remember that these actually have to be approved every year. They don't just automatically happen. And it's really helpful to have program ideas or discussions about what to do with them long before it occurs. That a lot of that information came out of Sun Prairie's housing study, which had a lot of direction for the housing funds, the TIF extension funds, but certainly a wide variety of things we've seen, from staffing to retaliation ordinances, and the tenant resource services that you have in Sun Prairie, which seems like is getting a tremendous amount of community support or community interest. Yeah, single family housing, Habitat for Humanity, just a lot of really great programs that you're all working on. So thanks again for coming and for your interest, everybody who attended. And please reach out to me. There's one more question. Please reach out to me, but I will, through the newsletter that you all get, I will let you know when the PowerPoints and the video recording is up on the website, the new website. How much oops. The last one was, hold on a second. Oh, thank you for such good information. Thanks, everyone. Okay, great. Well, lovely to see you. And we'll see you next time. Next time, the second Thursday in August is August 8th. And we will be having Rebecca Giroux, who's the representative, the WIDA representative, come and talk to us about what they've been seeing in the new WIDA funds for affordable housing, some of the things that they've learned, some of the changes they're making, and they're rolling out a new program for housing rehab for individual homeowners. And she's going to share information about that new program. And then we are also going to hear from our new Dane County Regional Housing Strategy Project Assistant, Alex DeSena, about the work that she's doing. Alex, I don't know if you're on the call, but feel free to say hi, give us a wave, and yeah, looking forward to introducing Alex more formally in the months to come.
Yeah, I'm really excited to work with you all. So I'll see you next time on August 8th.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank
afternoon.
you.
Thanks, Olivia.